Good afternoon, everybody. The series of Design Connects. Under that, we have several seminars, workshops, and webinars. So this is the webinar series. Today we have with us Yatin Pandya. Yatin is a known most integral person of human values, which always reflects in his work. That is what my understanding of Yatin. He is an author, researcher, and an activist who has been thoroughly done world of architecture and design through very visionary lenses. His firm footprint, Earth, reflects his concern about universal, E for environment, A for architecture, or an built environment, R for research, T for technology, and housing. His unique approach on every scale projects with deep understanding of Indian culture, Indian aesthetics, and respect for Indianness has brought him several national and international awards for architectural design, research, as well as lot of distinctions. The most recent one have been the United Nations Habitat Award and United States Curry Stone Foundation Prize for Sustainable Practices. He has written more than 300 articles in national and international journals, several books authored by him published internationally. He has written over 30, or he has made over 30 documentaries on architecture. He has been invited by several national and international environments, and he has guided over 300 students for master's and PhD theses. Environment, sustainability, socio-cultural approaches, timeless aesthetics, and economic affordability are key principles of his work. On today's situation, we need to look at world in a very critical manner and its all aspects in totality that can help emerge innovative human environments of today and tomorrow. So now I request Yatin Bhai for his unique insight into his new coming era. Yatin Bhai.
Namaskar. Thank you, Krishna Ben. Thank you all for joining. And I hope everybody is safe and keeping positive. I'm glad that AURO University has taken up this webinar series. It's not so much about lecture. It's just about all of us trying to share and exchange notes on the kind of topic of design and multiple points of view. So it's more a platform to dialogue and interact in that manner. I found it very timely, and that's why I have kind of picked this topic of designing with nature, because I feel that in current state and current stage, it has less to convince, it's more to be thinking, how do we now on be integral part of nature. This pandemic, despite its all hardship, and we still don't know the kind of end to that, so its uncertainty, I believe has brought some positives in terms of giving us a pause in a routine rut, and to pause and think critically and realign our path for future. So I think in that sense, there have been 3 or 4 things that this pandemic has brought about. The first, it has been an amazing equalizer. This is one of the diseases that has hardly been from bottom up, it's been kind of top down. So it has diffused the boundaries of nationality, philosophy, political ideology, developed or underdeveloped kind of a tag, GDPs, any criteria with which we used to distinguish, whether it's religion, belief system, color, education, the science might, it has actually affected all equally. So it's been a great equalizer. And what does that teach us is the humility. That actually as human being, we are still just the microcosm of a larger cosmos. We are no different than other species who we have to share this planet with. So first it has humbled us and equalized us on that ground. Second thing, it has very, very, very effectively proven. We used to say that, oh, we have far too many people for this planet to handle. We are exactly the same number of people. Maybe a lot of people died, but that way many more, got born also. So nearly the same number of people on the same planet, but with undue systems not coming into the nature. Nature has been able to correct its own course. We've seen with evidence that air has been cleaner, ozone layer has been sealed off, the water has been purified, the pollution has reduced both in solid and air terms and whatnot. So same number of people, but and they're all alive, they're all kind of doing most of their bit, but we have learned the difference between essential versus excess. So now we're living with essential, and that has told us that how much undue trips we used to make, what was not necessarily so much a part of our, we didn't have to compromise per se with the quality of life so much, except for physical boundary to be not able to cross beyond the point. So that's been another kind of a lesson we must think. Third one is that, have we noticed that even in the lockdown, we've been bound within four walls. I can see Krishnaben's room, maybe literally four walls here. But thanks to the window, thanks to the tree outside, thanks to the sun, which tells us it's morning and evening. So while physically we have not been able to go out, but it's been the nature that has taken away the boredom. You know what, you get bored with 70 channel TVs with all the kinds of platform connectivities, cable, etc. You get bored, but looking out of a window has been able to take away that boredom and give us that positive distraction. So it has been the nature which has been inherently loaded with diversity, loaded with the kind of spontaneous changes and so on and so forth. So simply living with nature with very basic essential has kept us going for nearly close to 2 months past. And I think that is where it's a good time to think about what that nature is, who as human, as kind of our part in this whole planet and with that nature to coexist is about. And especially as designers, as space makers, how do we integrate nature in our design? How do we design with nature? So that has been the kind of premise and the backdrop under which I want to share and talk about for a few minutes on these grounds. Now, I say that primarily, and as I say that, I hope now it's not so much matter of debate, but if I was to kind of put it a little simply, any existence for a human being is about two equations to harmonize. One, human to human, which is what we call society, which is what we call interactivity, whatever. And the other one is human to nature, because we are a part of that ecosystem. Our sustenance is dependent on that. And if we are able to harmonize these two, I think everything would be in unity. So it is that part of human to nature, if we can look at, and which is why I'm just trying to put across that why nature. It's not being Prakriti Premi. It's not being kind of, environmentalist here. It's simply as a designer and as human being, how in our daily routine has nature been so integral, but with our dependence lately on mechanized or non kind of natural systems, we tended to forget about it. So that's where I mean that this pandemic has brought in a good pause to ponder. Okay, we have to walk further. For example, who gave us a license and how did we take liberty to say in a hotel we would have air-conditioned room and it would be a fixed glazing. Thankfully, at least there is a glazing, but I can't open the window. Now, even if outside is 24, I have to run an AC to get inside 24. That is still at least a view and the light. But we have chosen a model. I don't know from where we took our own licenses for that. Blank corridor, doubly loaded hotel corridors, where even in a broad daylight, if you have to illuminate that corridor, that's a crime, or that is not doing anything. In fact, it's suffocating environment. If somebody orders Sizzler, everybody in the wing knows that who has been ordered before. And worst is that you can't even look out. You don't even know it's raining, sunny, what kind of mood, etc. Now, without going gaga on this, but under that pretext, let's understand nature from its fundamentals. Now, I put together maybe slides would be more prettier than my face. So let me move to sharing the screen and get onto the PowerPoint so that we can discuss more with those visuals. I hope everybody is able to look at the screen. It's a horizontal composition, so it should fill up your screen now. What I've said here is that as any living species, we have both been inspired by nature as well as sustained by nature. And here nature we are looking for, when we say design, for its timelessness quality, for its humanness, as well as for its sustainability part of it. Probing positives within the pandemic. So what's happened, many people are affected. We can't say it's great, but what is as a pause value of it, what it has brought about to ponder and think.
Yatin, there is a comment, they said they cannot see the screen. I cannot see the screen.
I've shared the screen. Let me go back again.
Sir, you have to click on the share also. One of the button over there, share. When you share the screen.
I've done that. First I've shared.
First you have to select, sir.
Share screen, share.
Sir, first of all, open the PPT. Then go to or down share screen. Select your PPT and share.
Yeah, but that's what I'm doing, because if it's a full screen, I'm not able to see the share
Alter tab,
screen.
sir. Alter tab. Alter and tab. You can use it.
Okay. Alter and tab. Alter and tab. Okay. One sec. It goes away in no second. Alter tab. Oh. Resume slideshow. Are you able to see it now?
No, sir.
No.
I was able to do it all the while. It's my first webinar. And one sec. I'm sharing the screen
Select
and putting on the.
Select the PPT, sir.
Is it on now?
And sir,
It's there. It's already there.
Sir, one of the
I cannot
buttons,
see it.
share button is there, sir, on the right hand side down. You have to select and first over select and then go to on the same window there is a button called share.
Share computer sound optimize
And then
share. Okay, share. Then I say, is it visible now?
No.
I've done share. I've done this, and I mean all these webinars so far. Choose to do this.
Sir, okay, you just come out from the.
One sec. Wait a minute. See, alter plus 5. Alter plus 5 is it, or S is?
Alter tab.
S. Okay. One sec. Let me try that. Alt S. Are you able to see now?
Sir, you minimize the window, zoom window. You minimize the zoom window.
I'm already on a full screen right now.
Now you come to zoom. You come to zoom, sir.
Okay, I'm in Zoom.
Now go to share screen. You have the down. You see
Yeah,
the share.
I am on share screen.
Now click on
And
the share.
right hand side, yeah, I did that. I've
No,
clicked
no,
on
sir.
the share.
You have to select the the screen that you want to share. The PPT window, click over there.
But if I put PPT window, my every other prompt goes away unless I go back to that part. Let me minimize and do it. Okay, let me minimize my PPT. Okay, now I'm here. Now I'm saying share, but it doesn't take any prompt. Share prompt is I have both now, but okay.
Sir, once you close your PPT first. Close PPT. Go to minimize the zoom screen. Go to PPT. Close PPT.
Yes. Okay, are you able to do it now?
Yes, sir. Now F. Okay, sir. It's on the screen.
Yeah,
You got it?
it.
Okay, fine. Thank you. All right. All the settings. All right. So, okay, I just at the first or second slide. So let me continue from there. Thank you for bringing to my notice. So what I was saying is that basically, if we just pause and ponder what has this pandemic taught us, it has said that nature tells us that as human, we are only microcosm of the cosmos. Nature is still mightier despite all we think is our knowledge and whatever about. So humility is what it has taught us, that we are just a small thing. And that doesn't mean that we are nobody, but it says that we should try not to conquer the nature, but we should coexist with the nature. So it is that kind of a dimension that we want to kind of talk about today. So nature in its own merit, as I say, that it's not God, it's not anybody else, but what does nature mean to us as human species and as designer? Therefore, how spatially, that says designer the last, as well as socio-culturally, as well as a phenomenon, can we consider and look at that? Simply nature as a phenomenon. What is the nature of the nature? First, nature means life. Whenever we were to say this is life, it's always the nature. You know, actually it's natural and artificial. So always that nature stands for life. Nature means the existence of any being. As I say, that very kind of soul of that existence is being part of that nature. Nature means outdoors, beyond the bounds of what human has created. Nature is the hope. I mean, imagine, we've already crossed, 40 days or whatever of the lockdown. And thanks that sun rises and sun sets, that one day the other, the intensity of life changes, and there is always that hope that, okay, one day is gone, next one is coming, and something is going to restore. So it's always that hope that keeps us going. Nature is omnipresence. As I said, that it's been equalizer, it's not been us. Sky is not just with us. Sun is not just with us. All other things are not just with us. Of course, we have tried to territorialize with water and land and other things, but basically it's omnipresent. Then nature as eternity, that if we were to talk about anything that is eternal, ever-pervading and expansive, that has been nature. Nature as time, we measure the time, we associate with that, and even our routine and mindset, gets kind of governed by that notion of time that we have clocked with nature. It's not the artificial clock we wear on the wrist, but it's the nature which we have kind of aligned with. Nature and spontaneity, and that is one point that I want to harp on. If anything inherently changes for sure and changes forever and changes spontaneously is nature. Suddenly there might be a cloud. Suddenly the leaf might kind of start shaking. Suddenly there might be a bird. Suddenly the intensity of light might change. Suddenly a kind of, maybe it starts raining. Sudden doesn't mean, it's not about sudden, but spontaneously. It's like a jazz where you just looking out of the window, the nature does its own act. And when I say nature, I'm saying here 6 elements, nature as sun and light, nature as wind and breeze, nature as vegetation, nature as water, nature as landform, and I even include nature as people and activity. When we go to hospital or when we are sitting on a plaza in a street, it's just looking around the people and spontaneity with which somebody goes down, there's a tamasha, that it is that aspect that keeps it constantly changing. Okay? So while space is always, what we create is constant, it doesn't change by an inch, it is always the nature and therefore the chemistry of time, space and people. So nature and the space is constantly evolving, constantly changing, constantly dynamic. So that whole sense of timelessness can't be achieved without the nature. So the diversity that brings in, therefore the ever freshness, that same space that you look at it, but with the changed aspect of nature, it feels different, it feels fresh next time you see it. So it never wears off. So that diversity, which is spontaneous and dynamic, is what is inherent to nature. And that's why nature is part of all celebrations. In fact, all rituals, from birth to death, from all festivity to all seasons, etc. So it's been part of a lot of human endeavors. So how has nature been an inspirer for our human endeavors? If we look at it, in fact, as many of scientific, achievements have been thanks to nature. Nature as nimitta, nature around us. Both apples have revolutionized the scientific world, and both have come from the apple. Nature has inspired, as we know, for n number of arts, crafts and culture around the world. But nature has also inspired architecture, not directly by form. One of the first columns that the man created was inspired by the tree trunk and the papyrus column in the Babylon. From there to whether it's Palm Jumeirah or whether all our even inventions, etc., whether it is the shape, whether it's the attributes, given this nest in the recent Olympics, and Mr. Calatrava. So I'm saying even the logic. So it's not the fancy of the shape that just because it looks like bird or a nest, but it was the inherent logic that we learned from nature, which environmentally, which not only aesthetically, but even structurally, meaning in terms of scientific principles, made a lot of sense. And if we look at Calatrava's structure, even way back Antonio Gaudi's Sagrada Familia, and we see there that many of the things, not just the visual motif, but a lot of arches and a lot of elements and a lot of idea of the structural system has been inspired by nature. So when we base it on that, nature has always taught us that there is nothing extra and there is nothing unessentially less or more. So it's just about optimum, so it's functional, it's kind of logical, and it is also aesthetic. So it is those aspects that if we can learn from, like here again, Calatrava, not only the physics, not only the structure, and that's why these structures have been quite optimal. They've not been just a copy, a blind kind of, it's not like a shoe house and trying to imitate shoe, but it's taken up the logic of how the structure or the nature behaves, and therefore how do we create. Now why I'm putting this is that actually nature has been a very inherent and intuitive aspect of us. And this intuition we have very, very profoundly applied as a child. Every child and every time as child, we have played an architect. Do you think these toddlers ever went to a school, a Zoom class, or a Google kind of a coaching, or a Baiju for that matter, or even parents taught them how to do it? They intuitively learned so many things of nature. They learned that, okay, if it's dry, it won't work. They would only do it with the moist soil. Sandy soil, binder is the water. But this has to be compacted, and this can only be done as molding. So, they would have done with Lego block something else, but when they do with sand, something else. So they would do the pile, they would compact it with the shovel, but they would actually make, scooped out tunnels, shake hands, and stuff like that. So that's the kind of way we have intuitively, you puncture holes, put your finger, press it up, and yet create aesthetic shapes. They didn't learn history, but they saw what was around, and nature told them a lot of things about material, about scale, about proportion, how big it would work or not, and intuitively how to craft it. The question is that as architect, we play the master rather than that innocent child. The child's innocence and that inquiry led it to create very, very intuitive structures. And this structure, they also knew no, child would cry saying that, oh, where did my structure? When it says that when the, sea kind of waves would come, that would all go. If the sun comes, it was all going to perish. And still you enjoy making that structure. So you accepted the kind of destruction or the thing that would perish, and still you involved so much to create it, and create it within the force of nature. You didn't try to outbid nature. So it's that innocence and that understanding with which, if we design, which was over time, men may or may not have always remained humble. Men tried to create Babylon stairs and tried to reach up to the sky. Nothing wrong with their ambition. But when structures would have failed, when it would have collapsed, then he knew the limits. So if you look at our vernacular architecture, that in a way seems to have interpreted nature in terms of its context and created the spaces which does resonate the context in terms of the place with its natural elements, which may be the harshness of sun, the kind of wind, the intensity of rain, as well as the palette that you can get or not get, likewise. And while I'm on this, in Kutch Bhunga, when we were doing the post-earthquake habitation, I want to bring this subtlety of nature, roof. At a certain time, we need a lot of grass to make the roofs over Bhunga. And the people told us that typically we are using the keep grass. And that's very good, but suddenly at this season, we can't find so much, so we might have to use the jawar kind of grass or gehu ka grass. So any hay was used, and it does look the same. But if keep grass was used, it would have been required to be kind of maintained or replaced not before 7 to 10 to 12 years altogether. As against if we use jawarka grass on top as a roof, left-hand type top, the roof I'm talking about, which is alien to this region, you might have to replace it every third year. And I was just trying to analyze and wonder, why is it so? And I figured that keep grass, which is local grass to that geology, geography, that condition, is also surviving in a very desert-like climate. And as a result, we all have learned in botany that where the water available to the plant is less, it does not branch so much. It doesn't have big leaves. So this grass is like a reed with knots coming at a very sparse interval. And knots are and otherwise the skin is very hard, so that water in the stem is not evaporated. So even that knot coming at far distance, and knot is the place, because knot is from where there would have been another branch which you would have shaved off, or there would have been some twig coming out of that, or a leaf. So that you've shaved off, and that is open to vagary, and that's what picks up the bacterial or the kind of decay, and that is where it kind of goes bad. So as against the jawar or the other one where the water has been fed more than the other one, it would sprout more closely, and therefore there are very close-knit knots, and they are the kind of culprit. So even the material which has gone through the same conditions of that region has also behaved in that way, and therefore it is sustaining in that region better than anything else. So even a dead stem performs better being from that region. So that was the kind of interlink between these houses. So I've definitely not put labels here which is from where, but I'm sure we all can guess very correctly, if not the exact base, at least the climatic base, the kind of vegetation cover, etc., possible around the weather, as well as the resource and the culture that might be available there. These are world maps where clothing is different because the climate is different, and to adapt to that, the methods are different. There was a study done in Japan that if these executives were relieved of this ties and tuxedo, the very formal three-piece suit kind of dressing, they would have felt the same level of comfort with couple of degree warmer AC temperature. So when we try to universalize even the dress code, if you have to have a multinational tie tuxedo dress code in Terili in Kerala, only air conditioner can comfort you. But if from a coastal region, if people wear simply the mond and they are bare-chested, they are most appropriately dressed. That's understanding the nature in dressing, to food pattern, to whatever. So clothing is different all over the world. People are different with their, where the intensity of sun is high, we have developed the pigmentation of skin colors such that we can handle certain UV rays or whatever, etc. And this is elementary. I'm not speaking anything big. I'm just wanting to question after this slide. Food, basic food type is different, ingredients are different. This is a very naive analysis, but wherever, even the way we have clocked our time, most hot places, they have a siesta routine. Now take in Europe, the Spain and Portugal, take in North America, the South America, closer to the equator, and take in India, something like Saurashtra and that region. And even if, so that has become a tradition so as to be close to the comfortable time rather than 9 to 6 as a set time. So that's what I'm saying, being with nature. Nature has its own vagary. But why do we have to be slave of something? Like in this pandemic, the best freedom I'm sure we all have felt is that you would have also worked for 12 hours a day perhaps, but you were able to time yourself, your thing. You did not have to worry to leave the book halfway to say that, oh, it's 8:45. Okay, so likewise, so in the world, food is also different. The other kind of a very naive generalization, if I may make, the brighter the kind of sun, the brighter the palette of color and appreciation. So desert of Mexico or Africa or Kutch or Rajasthan, and the brighter color that you see, as against in a subdued light, a pastel shade. So what kind of things can be appreciated? And even if you take the food for now, warmer the kind of climate, more spicier the food, maybe because of which if you perspire, you have body evaporative cooling through your own perspiration, and that's what it comforts you. Now, if everything like we saw was different, the attire, the food, the people, and the kind of mannerism and day of routine of the day, way of life, why on earth world architecture is the same? This is true pictures from all countries. You take alphabetically any country, pick your finger on one, and you won't go wrong. Is this we call working with nature? Nature doesn't mean I have to plant on my bed, but it's simply that we be in harmony of the ecosystem that which we have no right to disturb. What we are trying to do is conquer the nature under the disguise of progress with the tool of technology. Technology is not a bad word. Development has to occur. But when we become supreme over the rest of the system, then at one point it revolts. And as I say, that it corrects its own course, which is the time when it's earthquake, it's tsunami, when it's pandemics like this, we understand our status and stature. So this is where, at least for Indian context, we need to ponder which was the response to the nature of that given milieu. Nature being people, nature being place with its all kinds of vagaries as well as resources. So both are Kerala, both are Jaipur. Which lesson we need to learn? Like courtyard in a hot, dry climate did wonders. We did not suffocate. It ventilated as well as it gave fantastic light and view and ventilation. So we could live outdoors and yet away from the vagary of the harsh climate. Breezy conditions and the Kolkata with even the colonial hangover, which actually adapted, British created bungalow as a typology where they brought in their lifestyle, but they made it suit to Indian context. So veranda living rather than courtyard. And therefore, in a hot and humid climate, they found where the transparency of breezes, multi-tiered roof, and so on and so forth. So first, nature for simple environmental comfort, which I just simply want to very quickly run through. As architects, as designer, we are triply responsible. We have to understand our responsibility. First, the moment we put a building, we are altering the landscape. So we are the alterer, and therefore we have to take the onus and be responsible of what are we altering, and for better or for worse. So to begin with, we are an intervener, we like or not, and that's where that humility, that you don't have a right to overpower the other systems. So we have to know that sustainability rhymes with humility. The other one is that, as you see here, we are a very large consumer of the resource, 42% larger than the industry for that matter. So energy, water, land, equally high producer or consumer of raw materials and high producer of pollutants, may it be gases, water, solid waste, and so on and so forth. And the third responsibility that is put on us is that what we create arguably lasts even beyond us. And therefore also our mistake would perpetuate for future. And that's why we have to be absolutely responsible as well as responsive to the context in which we are putting, not the client. And if you see that, therefore, how intuitively we did what we did. This is my favorite example on the left, that land as a resource. We right now, unfortunately, since when we learned economics, we always say demand and supply. So right now, if supply is difficult, I can charge any amount and that is fair. We have accepted that equation. Look at the slide on the left here, that it's just an earthen tablet and 2nd century BC Jataka illustration of a Jetwan park. What does it show? It shows that the dark picture, I don't know how your screen is showing you the image, it says it was an agrarian society. There was enough of land. There were very few people, no modernization, no industrialization, no westernization, no developerization. And yet it said that as much gold tablets you can spread is the amount of land that you can own. All that dark voids are the gold pieces. So they equated land as pricey even when it was available in abundance, because it was the renewable resource. That was their survival source. That's why in the very first 4 civilizations, against all 4 rivers, we built very compactly. So first civilization, we shared 3 sides, rectilinear houses, deep, long. So maximizing the land use, walkable distances, and so on and so forth. That attitude even continued In right-hand side picture, you can see Dubrovnik World Heritage Site. 40 acres land has already thousands of people living sustainably. We continue to build compactly without wasting the land, maybe now for the defense so that you're less vulnerable to the external vagaries. But that 40 acre which could house sustainably, and why I say World Heritage is one of the most beautiful settlements that you can see and living, is exactly the same area. If you see the right hand side top image, is typically known as cloverleaf intersection, which also takes 40 acre of land, which you can see bottom right, is how it is superimposed, and both are exactly the same area. But look at the change of the attitude to land. In what one self-sufficient city, on the other the same land is simply a luxury of not slowing down car from 100 kilometers an hour on an expressway to change a direction. Okay, so that's the attitude we've kind of wondering. What way did we manage? We wanted the illumination, we wanted the light and the view. So we built windows in a wall, but window proportion we augmented, and the wall was thick insulated mass. So we did not get the heat, but we allowed for the light and the view. Ventilation is currently another forgotten art. As I gave an example that in a hotel, we tend to have a fixed glazing. If it was openable, at least in a fair weather, I might be able to open and at least get some outdoor air or even a sound for that matter there. So we knew in a traditional architecture, the idea of multi-tiered roof for cross ventilation, that hot air could escape out from the various volume roof and the voids created there. Openings were fantastic devices to mitigate light, view, and ventilation obligation. For example, Jali. It's fallacy to think that only glass has given us the big views. We knew it already through Jalis. And with Jali, actually, what glass doesn't do, it does three more things. First, the one-way privacy. Queens, Ranis, ladies of the house could see everything from inside out, and because of the light difference from outside, people knew nothing about inside. So that one-way communication. So cultural privacy. Then you allowed for the glow and the light, but not you diffuse because of the aperture size, the same being as the thickness of material. You could diffuse the light, so you can get the illumination, but not the direct glare of the sun. And then with the small aperture, you could actually induce the breeze by the Venturi effect, so that it picks up velocity. And even Mr. Laurie Baker has designed all his aesthetics using very local earthy material, but in a humid climate, even with this opaque material like brick, he has been able to make it as much transparent to breeze by the Jali apertures. And that also gives, with Bernoulli principle, by compressing and releasing the cooling. So these are scientific dimensions of this for ventilation. So light, view, and ventilation, all these coming through this aperture type. Terraces, how many of us have thanked our father, developer, whoever, for a little balcony, for a good window, for a terrace that today we have been able to go out to, and therefore enjoy the nature and take away our boredom by being inside the room, which might have been air conditioner on, but at least it's not satisfying us mentally or engaging us all the time. So terraces and outdoor areas, courtyard. My next book is Courtyard Houses of India, hopefully soon out of pandemic, but not about the book. What I'm trying to say, what we found in that is cross India, pan India, from Kerala to even Leh, and this was Gujarat and Saurashtra to Bengal, that has been the common DNA of vernacular house type of India. So court bringing in ventilation, view, as well as the internal kind of spatial element and retarding the sun and bringing in the light. So we never compromise with nature, even if they were compactly built all along these ages. It's only last 2 decades or so we have taken liberty to substitute nature with artificial means, and that's what, if we can simply ponder and pause and realign ourselves with. We have some examples which you know, so I'm not going to describe, but architect Balkrishna Doshi's studio, Sangath, where nature does most of the bit, including environmental, including climatic, as well as functional, and on top of all, spatial. For example, when you come, one kind of spatial condition, but by nature, the landform and the surrounding landscape kind of encloses you. Then it allows you to leak through and suggest to another, which is where the mound doesn't. So you naturally don't climb the mound, you don't climb this little high plinth, you move around. Then at a nook, you glance and you get the idea of the panoramic expanse of the building. So building appears differently, and then as soon as you're just about to come at a diagonal point to circumvent, suddenly a water becomes an element of surprise, but it's strategically located not only as a surprise to engage you with curiosity, but it's also reflecting the whole built form, those vaulted shells of the Sangath into it. So you get a full panoramic view, you get a total bearing of that architecture, and then now you can piece together water in different forms, vegetation in different forms, and even the earth modulation. Earth naturally modulates to become a kind of a platform, an amphitheater. Then the tree becomes a kind of gateway to bring you to this veranda-like space where you can still get a glimpse of the sky. And then when you go inside, it's a perfect 360-degree loop where the small cutout outside in that gave you a peak. Now you can reconnect from inside out, and the way light has been modulated, the water has been kind of shown in different form, from its sound value to cascading value to a quiet one with reflective value to a vegetation part of it as well as the vegetation. So this is the way nature has given us more in nourishing mind, body as well as soul. So if we try and understand few elements of nature. So first I take light or a sun, and what are the kind of things. So as phenomenon, light means life, let there be light, and that means that there be light. Light, as I'm saying, daylight, is referring to cardinal direction. It's always the east that most culture gets referred to. Even if it's west, it's coming from east and west as setting and rising sun. Light as therefore direction, light as form. Light forms the shadow. So that's a bonus. It's a piggy ride that light gets associated with shadow, and therefore it is that shadow, because light needs a medium to kind of manifest, and that shadow creates the dynamism. So it's through the light that aspect of obstruction, bringing shadow on the surface that it receives, and then the psychedelic or the dynamism of that shadows. And shadows form the pattern. It also gives directionality. Light comes with color. It's in the light. That white light hides all those colors. As I say, light manifests through a medium. Light has cultural, environmental, and spatial dimension. So very quickly, if we try and understand that, our morning ritual starts with offering water to sun, two opposites which never come together, but we notionally bring them together in our palm, where water and sky, earth and the heaven, hot and cold, two opposites, but notionally comes together in our. And the same in Sandhya Arti or morning Arghya. So it's all to revere the nature, and nature as the cyclic aspect of nature. So that's another thing. There are seasons, there is time, there is diurnal cycle, or for some even different kinds of cycle. If you take planet, and if you take even a shorter one for insects. So what are the cultural notions, light and festivity, that we all know? Social responses trigger by the presence, absence, or intensity of light, the mood, and the ambience changes. And for that light, the source is the punctures, as we saw Jali as a type. So punctures, and here this is one of the houses we did. So daytime in a double height area, the cutout of a dining, the puncture in the shape of a bird, the reflection as you see in the glass would keep distorting, moving, and so the dynamics of that through shadow can be captured. Light, again, directional apertures, and therefore they do differently through the day, the chemistry within the space. Jali, as we already saw, communication, modulation of light, patterning, and this is a dynamic Jali in Islamic Center, and daylight as manifested in several ways. Light as a form. So it's inherent to light what it is by its parallel kind of quality, by its infiniteness, etc. How we translate, giving a wash to the wall, giving a. So this is again a slit opening. So morning low sun or evening setting sun gives a glow into the roof, and it kind of invites you to wake up or so. And similarly, the wash on the wall. This one is in the kitchen. So naturally, it illuminates and takes away the hot air and smell through ventilative cooling. So skylight, as I said, diffuse light, and yet becoming a ventilating feature, and manifesting color by allowing that sort of a barrier or medium. A space maker, natural element do for us, as that's what as a designer we kind of concerned about. So light becomes a visual focus, and depending on your narrative, your story, the space can exploit AURO Chapel in Boston, and again the sort of chandelier of mother of pearl as a medium, and it receives the natural light, and that becomes the altar placement. So it becomes that visual focus. Courtyard in a Haveli architecture became that central soul of the house, or central space of the house, and the whole house was organized around it. We know from Matri Mandir the new interpretation, but yet light as a focal point. Then light can manipulate the perception of scale. For example, in a long tunnel, if you don't have in-between kind of references, it squashes the depth in our perception. That where there is light is the end of the tunnel. But with some serration, with some manifestation of intervals within, it feels longer than what it is. Okay? So both of them, but one feels longer than the other. So light, its perception, then the repetition of that. So the idea of rhythm, etc., that it creates through perspectival kind of illusion, it gives the enhancement to the perception of depth. Cardinal direction, as I say, that we can refer to, and even otherwise the directionality, how do you mold it, how do you allow it to manifest, and accordingly it gives linear, circular movement, and not only in one direction that it guides to, but it even in the other direction, like vertical direction also, because quite often the aperture from top becomes the source to get it from. Governing the mood with changing, as I say, time, space, chemistry, and the way light changes, Salk Institute in one kind of a condition, another kind of condition, and so on and so forth. How do you enhance the surface texture or a plane by giving a certain kind of wash of the light to these, whatever texture, but the whole condition of light, and as a result, it's already been there, but only with light that comes to life, so to say. Third dimension can only be brought out with light and shadows. So that's why flash photography makes it flat, but it's always those contours are enhanced. Uh, Light emanating the space and volume. Now here you saw the vertical source, so it tells you that how tall it is, as well as what is the horizontal area that it is confining within. Like here, light demarcates the space extent. It punctuates the nodes. So with the intensity of light and whatever, we organize the space, and even if there is an onlooker when we walk, we kind of identify those junctures. So whether it's again horizontal or vertical, like this one gives a clue for a vertical thing, and that also in installation art used creatively by the simple idea of a shadow, casting shadow. This is one of the artist's installation, just randomly placed objects, but it provides a skyline when it's reflected, a kind of bottles, but it creates a face, or a seashore or a lake shore kind of an idea. Light, again, three-dimensional, can be made flat. This is lighting, of course, and can change the meaning, but it's all about celebration. It's all about adding value by recognizing that and creating abstract forms and installations out of it. So it creates engagement. As I said, the fact that it's changing, fact that it's spontaneous, and fact that there's variety, it brings in that sense of engagement, both kind of engagement, that you get active and hyperactive, or you get very calm and it becomes serene. So it also can conjure those kinds of association. It's just one sequence of light design. Here in interior context, of course, it's a stage design. But why is it important to go through this is that even when we do outdoor spaces, how light plays its role in perception and changing the meaning of perception of space and mood. So in a stage set, you don't have much liberty, but how do you to do much to the stage all the time? But with simple lighting, how do you change the mood? How do you change the manipulation and perception of scale? Or how do you give directionality? Or how do you emphasize the kind of priority from one to the other? So this is a popular play of Shakespeare's Macbeth, played in Philadelphia, and lighting designer has been John Quay. Now, this one, with the surrounding blurred and the way light comes, it simply highlights that these are the two important characters here. Now here, that scale has diminished, but visual focus has been accentuated. That you don't know what's back, what is this. Maybe it is stretched a little bit horizontally, but it's now focuses on one. So visual focus is accentuated. Now scale is also enhanced. Now you can see depth and breadth of it, but everybody is an equal player. There's no one particular one here as more important than the other. Now visual focus has shifted. Whatever reflects, it may not even be the character, it could be an object, it could be just a form. So now you just see visual form as what it is. This as character may not be important, this as visual form is what is more important. So what medium is made to receive that light is how it comes across. Here, simply by light, it tells you which way there is a mystery, there is an anticipation, which direction you should be little aware of, and then that direction, maybe there's something happening. So now the depth is given by even lighting the end one, so you know that, oh, here to there, that's the whole kind of expanse, and yet in one direction only. Now when the backdrop is lit, now you get the context that, oh, it's in such and such place, that it is, maybe it's in a semi-basement, that it is in a church or something like this, or that it is a window over there. So it now begins to give association to the place and familiarity of that. Now that top aperture over here, the light now enhances the vertical scale and says, oh, it's a big volume, likewise. So with simple light, what could be played up? In daylight, outdoors, these places, so I won't get too much into that, but that whole idea of a prayer being introspection, what is the temple architecture playing with light with? it of course changes the enclosure, but with that the light keeps changing from outside to inside by the layers. When you come, you have come from a very, very amorphous space to a very contained space, very large into very intimate, but most importantly, very, very sort of, bright space into a very dark space. So this is a whole sequence from an outside distance to relay of abelian elements coming into the corridor, and then even before the end of the sequence, the kind of first layer, and the inside is totally dark, and that also has a great philosophic meaning, that it's so dark that what you conjure with the mind's eye is the kind of God in front. So even the God's form is not that specified. You can make your own image of the God. So that narrative of temple, how is this even interpreted with a very different and new vocabulary in contemporary architecture? To me, this mathematically comes closest to that experience of diminishing gradual transition of light and increasing sense of enclosure. So from distance, it's an object which has like a rising sun in a golden glow kind of a thing with the sun coming in. It's a sort of, and as you go in, you gradually suck, the light gets modulated, and the kind of spiral movement like a pradakshina, and then modulated light, and then the most inside light is the mythical one, like the Centurion, where it's just enough bright not to trip on somebody sitting there, and at the same time not too bright to be distracted by who is next to you. So that's how the light as a natural element does spatial, emotional, cultural and environmental bit for us. Quickly for water, you know, water is again life, water is nature, water is the basic source of existence. Cheer and our childhood memories come together. So every child of anybody comes out with water and celebration, glamour. What are the attributes? Infinity, omnipresence, dynamism by its flow, vertical or horizontal, celebration again, but the spatial role. So water can also be visual focus. So again, Matri Mandir, below the suspended pole, below it's all story of water. It can create ripples and thereby rhythms, etc. And reflection. So the value of reflection in a tranquil water. So attribute of sound can give you anticipation that there is a fall. It will like in a seashore. It's the sound of the sea that orients us towards that, or gives us a bearing that this side is a sea. Here it's a tranquility part, which means reflection, and reflection in Abu Dhabi, that so many 100 meters away in between there is a highway, but this Grand Mosque is reflected in a very kind of a shallow bowl of water and engagement. Duplication of scale, you can make infinite scale by reflection, you can by refraction reduce it, or by doubling by mirror effect make it even grander and glamorous. You know, like here it's like an infinity pool and it goes just endless or seamless. Water surrounding you demarcates your space. This one is an interesting sequence where different attributes of water and different mood, feeling and human responses it's able to create. This is a sequence of Niagara Falls. As you see that CN Tower, this is from American side what it might look at trickling down or so. This is from that tower an aerial view, where as a planner you get the comprehension. Aha, water comes from all this, acha, there is a drop here and it kind of sinks in from there, and this is what. But it doesn't kind of give you much of an emotional sort of a bond with that. It's aerial view. But when you are at the ground level, now it's a little more curious. You would like to take selfie there because it's a particular moment that water comes, goes down. So it's that threshold and that's what you enjoy. But it's kind of a fun mood over there, and again with season, with different kinds of time and the day. But below these there is a tunnel, and as you can see here at that tunnel, that gushing water, that fall, you can see in front of you. And I'm sure I've been there when it's protected, but even if there was no glazing there, I bet you, even if you want to commit suicide, this point you won't ever jump from. It's so scary. Water is in front, you see the power and gush of the water. So when it comes on the top, it was not scary. here it's the most power and the strength of water that you find. And then finally you take that Maid of the Mist, the ride, and you come right inside that. And even somebody like me who can't swim, you should be afraid that, boat is also dangling all the time. There's water all around. If you happen to just fall down, there's no way you can come up because you don't know swimming. And yet at this point it's mythical, it's actually romantic feeling. This should be the scariest, but here you think of your would-be girlfriend or whatever over there. So that's the kind of way different aspect attributes of water in different conditions create that mood, ambience, and the kind of mindset, and as a result, as human, you react accordingly. I mean, its integration in space can be best seen in Mandu, Jahaj Mahal. It's called Jahaj Mahal because it's sited between two ponds with different levels. So Moon's Talav first accumulates entire region's water, then it's channelized into the first arrival pond, so it's integrated in an arrival sequence. Then it kind of cascades down through these Mughal chadars where gargle and sparkle of water, dazzle of water. Then by gravity, once it's taken up to the roof with channel and very beautiful 3D kind of, I had actually a video, but I was told that it doesn't stream that well, so I've removed it. But I have myself documented this in the video form with its function. So you get this beautiful flowing water with puzzling kind of hide and seek aspect of water comes into the first hammam for king and queen, then goes to lower hammam for the courtiers, and without wasting any drop, then it becomes by gravity fountain. With the channel, it comes into Kapur Talav, and there it is at a lower level, that water body, and the whole system is integrated environmentally, functionally, spatially, and emotionally. Vegetation as nature, that again I've just illustrated that it with the trunk value can, like a column, be it colonnade, be it directionality, time and season, diurnal as well as the kind of various season, fruiting and flowering. With its canopy, it creates subspaces and volume definition, and with its surfaces, it gives you the texture, and floor is the only texture on which you get a sense of touch. So you can feel the softness, hardness, coarseness, texture, etc. And this is the wonderful example of integrating nature in more than many ways, including as a reproductive resource. This is, as you know, Manorama Sarabai's house by Le Corbusier, almost 7 years ago. And unless you see the left and right picture, it's very difficult to assume that the right-hand side middle top is the ground floor. The right-hand side extreme right is the top is the first floor, and the middle bottom is the second floor. So it's been kind of taking that if you take away the built nature, land, and the vegetation by putting building, can you not substitute it over the roof? Or here it takes advantage of the vertical surface. So even in a contemporary architecture which you admire. People, as I said, this is just a very quick 3-slide sequence. Same urban open space in Ahmedabad, even today in 21st century. Same physical space, but early morning, it's a cow grazing ground with that mood and that light and that activity. Same space in the afternoon is an intense business district, and same in the evening is an outdoor eatery. Okay, physically space hasn't changed, but with nature and people, it has transformed its mood. When you are eating and hogging pani puri, maybe it is banned to speak this word right now in a lockout for Gujarat, but at least you get all the time a mood where you would not even remember vehicle in the afternoon. So just allow me 5 more minutes, and so that I don't sound like a preacher, how a natural light made a difference in the quality of life of people. A very small intervention like this empty bottle, but internally reflecting the sun, put in a puncture in a slum housing of Ahmedabad, could illuminate the spaces. And we also had another solution as a dormer, we call it Ujasyu, and this has been installed in hundreds of houses. And what it has done is that it has not only economized their electricity bill to the order of 250 rupee a month, but it has affected their mental stress level, reduced that, they can produce much more, they're more cheerful, and even their education and health component has gone healthier. So just the natural light versus low natural light, same house, and 100% responses have said that how many ways they have benefited by that, by a simple skylight and diffuse light intervention. This is another one where living with nature, this is in an extremely harsh condition. We redeveloped this settlement after the earthquake in Kutch, Ludia, Gandhinugam, where even in harsh condition, you can see the dignity, the Khamir in their place and space, and the art, culture, architecture, and environment were so intertwined, which is where in our intervention, we use the local soil, and as I said, the kip grass, etc. But where we dug up to get that soil for so many houses, we consciously made a kind of a clay strata pond by default. And with 3 inches of rainfall in that monsoon there, they got water, and clay strata holds it for a little longer. And as a result, in a desert, they got this agriculture. So even the ecology changes, and look at the kind of smiles on their faces. When there is water in a desert, it's an absolute festival, and even their cultural associations change. So it's a whole thing of life. And they continued staying there with their craft. And these are post, kind of redevelopment houses. This we had won the award. So they asked us to kind of document it after 10 years. And these are there for recent pictures, how they still live, maintaining their own nature of culture, of environment. 45 degree outside, inside is not more than 32 to 34, but small window, but small window with white clay, and the mirror magnifies, And the last one of the memorials, which is only created by elements of nature, 5 elements of nature. This is a memorial for the founder of Cadila Pharma and one of the Bhishma Pitama pharmacy industry in India. This is where he was cremated. So it's basically a bindu, a point around which there is a tranquil water for reflection and meditation. There is an element of light and fire, and around that different plant species, more than 120 plant species, the water in different forms. So here you can hear a sort of meditative sound of gargle and sparkle. Then even the herbal plantation like tulsi, damro, rose, mogro, etc. over there, and the art form, which is to depict the cyclic nature of time and birth, death, and rebirth. So inspired from his life, etc. He was an ardent fan of, Bhagavad Gita. So these are all the kind of elements where some of those messages to take away are taken. The natural landscape to feel the texture, etc. as well. The craft and the play of light, shadows, etc. And even at night lighting. So it's just the vegetation, the landform, the water, the light, and of course the space. So even the exhibition area is fully buried, even though it's a 40 feet span and so forth, and it's naturally cladded over, both for climate as well as its humidity aspect, that building should not stand out. So in short, I do believe that design has a role to play, pandemic, post-pandemic, but we can empower through design, like I showed with that Ujasu. But our goal is that with that to improve the quality of life. And when we say anything about life, mentally, notionally, physically, environmentally, spatially, romantically, I think the center of which remains to be the nature. So I think we have to understand that as human beings, we are an aspect of larger nature, and we should not have any arrogance to disturb that coexistence and balance. Glamour and beauty both catch our attention to begin with, but glamour being applique and temporal fades away like a fashion in no time. But beauty is integral. It is coming from the nature of nature, and therefore it is timeless. So I invite you to traverse in the immensity of time and space and of notion and reality of this planet, which nature has rejuvenated itself. And as human beings, I believe we deserve to desire that post-pandemic. Thank you for your patient listening. And thanks, AURO, for giving me this chance to share my points of view. I'll be happy to answer any questions if there is time and if there are questions.
Thank you, Yatin bhai. Do we have time? Manish bhai?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, we have a time.
Okay, so are there any questions? I don't know how to read it because Abhijit is not here. So how do I get to it? In the chat?
Yes, ma'am, I'm here.
Can you read those things?
Mr. Ala Parikh is asking, what is timelessness of space according to you?
Yes, a good question. And in some other formats, I have tried to answer this. It's not a vague term. First of all, it's not abstract. I never understood for myself, but what I simplified for myself is it's neither complicated nor it's abstract, but it's most critical and important. Timelessness is engagement of experience. So, for example, and over time, so something was fresh when you first looked at it. It's like girlfriend, even after marriage, after 50th, on the 50th marriage anniversary, you think is the person that you want to fall in love with. That is timelessness. That time has not affected it. Now that can only come about if it was only the looks and the lust that would wear off. That's what we were saying was the glamour. So it's not that what catches attention and first time you take 10,000 pictures, but 10th time you go there and you don't even give a second glance. Unfortunately, that's the case with the steel glass building. Many of them first was a novelty, but then we never even looked back at it again. So in short, when it continues to engage us, exalting time and still relate to us and experientially be part of our kind of perception, that's what to me is timelessness. Now, if I give one example, for the time I had cut down, but 2 days ago I gave another webinar where I explained some of this phenomenon. But like, for example, step well, even after why I deliberately am not saying temple or some other palaces. Stepwell is a very modest structure. Like Ahmedabad, Adalat Nivav, 6th century old utilitarian object. It's not even an architectural space building per se. It's just a device to fetch water, steps to lead you to the first aquifer. But the way in scarcity of water it has celebrated itself, that entire journey and the way it narrates itself from outside. So first it's all below ground, 6th century old, functionally obsolete, and even today as a tourist, as an onlooker, with no intention of dipping yourself into that water or fetching it over your head, the matka, if it pulls you down 6 full story without thinking of an elevator, I think that pull of space to me is that quality of timelessness. And how does it get it? It uses all its design decision. For example, the way it narrates itself, from middle of nowhere, you get to outcrop of stone with few steps. Now to go down, you're made to climb up, which means that it masks the view beyond. But the moment you take the step up, now you know the void. So there is engagement, there is curiosity, there is a kind of involvement of you to decipher, like a treasure hunt, like a suspense film where every mode, there is a different kind of a thing, twist and turn. So even architecturally, the narratives are taken like that. So when you come there, now the nature has been put in. So there is a light. So you get with a void in that cutout, a visual focus. When you come there, you're surrounded from 3 sides by the steps. So you turn to the 4th and you get to know the depth or the total length of the structure. But you have to take element of stair. An element of stair means every platform that you come down, your sense of enclosure in perception changes, your intensity of light changes, column and beam composition visually changes, and if you are sensitive, your sense of temperature changes. So every platform, it keeps changing, and only at the end water is revealed. So water was just a nimitt, but it's that journey with all those changing aspects that kept you engaged. So even after 6th century with very little carving and no intention of functional use, neither technically it is a temple. So you're not even saying that you are here for Krishna or Jesus or Allah. And still, if that structure as a ruin interests you, most of their tourism is to the ruin, which is even in that state, but partially it has engaged you. It has kind of, triggered your imagination, and notion and physics both have engaged to create that composite experience. So that is, and over time, seeing it once doesn't mean it is worn off. You can keep seeing it over and over. So that is the quality of it, stressed over time to remain fresh in our psyche. That's this timelessness.
Abhijit, any other questions? Can you see it? Thank you, Yatin bhai.
All right, thank you for this platform. And
is there any other question? Abhijit?
Yes, sir. There are a couple more questions we can ask for them.
Yeah, if you have time, I'm there for all whatever.
Yes, sir, we have time, no problem. There's a student, Manthan Navadia. He is asking, natural light also affects temperature, and how do we control it?
Now, again, a good question. And all this while, where I said that we need the light as illumination, we need the light as its natural kind of play. But along with that, the kind of package deal is that we get the glare and the haze and the heat. That's why in Indian context, or where the sky component high, is the contradiction to resolve with diffusion of light. So that's why I said all those strategies of fenestration, a skylight. So it gives an indirect light. That's why I showed, even the slides of Sangat or the temple sequence or other, where natural light is drawn in, but not directly as a glare, but it has been allowed to reflect through the wall and come in. So one is skylight. The other one is a jali, where in jali, the punctures arguably are the same size as the thickness of the material or little smaller. So when sun strikes at an angle, the thickness becomes like a louver. It doesn't allow the sun to directly come in as a glare or the ray, but from there it bounces off and then it reflects on the wall, and so it gives that indirect light. The light shelf used to be another system. That light comes, bounces through the ceiling and then comes down. Courtyard was an element that in a deep long house, three sides are shared. So how do you get the punctures from the top? So again, when sun is overhead, there would be a time at which there will be glare, and we may avoid that sitting area for any use. But later on, when sun goes slightly at an angle, it deflects off the wall and kind of expands around. And that's where the inner spaces remain cheerful, brightly lit, and without any kind of negative influences of the sun and the glare. Like in today's context, we had another aperture type, 3-part window. Window has 3 functions: light, view, and ventilation. So top one was ventilator to allow for hot air to escape. Middle one was for the view and communication. And the lower one was for the breeze and the kind of deflected, or even the ventilator would have deflected light from the ceiling, the other one from the floor. So likewise, the source of the light as window, that design is very critical, and that proportion as well as that location. For example, next to wall, in the perpendicular direction, if you have a little sleet, then the setting sun would have a wash onto that wall, and the texture, like you saw in some example, would come out. So it would glow, but you would not get the direct sun and the glare. Same contradiction for us is even with the breeze direction. Southwest is good for breeze but bad for sun. And still for breeze you want a window, and still for sun you want to protect it. That's why we had chajjas, we had louvers, you have sun breakers in case of Corbusiers, Milona's building, etc. So this is how we need to know how to diffuse. And that's why I said that at least for daylight in India, it's crying that in daytime if you have to rely on artificial light. Because our problem is not getting light, but rather diffusing it. And the slides I showed you was only the means by which you can get light and yet diffuse it. So punctures, jali, louvers, right orientation, right proportion, right location, slit windows rather than big aperture, as well as the outdoor protective element as chhajas and so and so forth. Yeah?
There is one question by MS saying you had shown the
Abhijit?
image of glass facades around the world and said that why the same language of architecture around the world. With
Yeah.
respect to the same, I want to understand that are you talking about the way glass is used in various contexts, or are you against the use of glass as a so-called modern material?
No, what I was showing was actually a close-up because I had to show more. So it was actually a built architecture. It's not glass as a material. I was saying architecture. Now, what about that architecture? One, it is skin deep. It is just the facade. Second, it is all only steel and glass or glazing. Third, it does not therefore reflect by its architecture the interface zone. Interface zone usually is for environmental mitigation. For example, if I have an overhang, I know I want to cut down the sun. If I have a larger sloping roof, I know it is rain and the snow. If I have even interface for public activity, for example, in our poor house, we don't have compound wall. The otlas come out, otlas give you transition, and yet that becomes the kind of active interface. If you're sitting on otla, you're in your private territory, and yet you can be part of the streets. A going person can say Masi Kemcho, you know, but that still gives a territorial distinction to say कि भैया मारू घर से तुम पर ना हो, you know. And so likewise, it is that zone which mitigates with outside for human interaction, for climate interaction, and climate, as I say, with sun, wind, water. Fixed glass, as I said, even the breeze is not coming in. So it's not glass as a material per se. As I said, 3-part window, and you could still open the window. I have no problem with. But fixed glazing, so everything is controlled. So outside nature is just not allowed to come in except for the view. Okay, so that being a standard phenomenon, so that's where I was commenting. So that as an architectural resolution, it is not the material per se, it is not just one technique, it is that actually, that is the architecture. If you take external picture, it's a facade, that is what is inside, or that is just a thin layer that separates inside and outside.
Okay.
There's one question regarding...
Abhijit?
Yes, ma'am.
Go on, please.
Yes, sir. So there's a question, what would be the standard method to implement in urban planning? I think by this, the person is referring to integrating nature and theories that you mentioned about making it much more livelier and healthier.
Yeah, no, again a good question, but yesterday I answered this in where it was about reinterpreting tradition or wisdom of it. For example, all these buildings that you saw, glass one and one, you know, I'd studied the building urban design guideline in Montreal. And what did it say? So how do you create bylaw with nature? For example, earlier in most of Gujarat and India, 4-foot balcony was free of FSI. Your terraces or verandas were never counted in FSI. So it was an incentive given to people to come out and live outdoor life. Now today, how stupid that understanding has been lost, how stupidly. We allow 2 feet of extension in a margin for architectural kind of a gesture with a projecting mass, but that cannot be at a floor level, so to extend your floor. I cannot have a cupboard to make it an insulative buffer. I cannot use that. I can only make it be seen. So that is showing that originally it came by bringing in nature, and 4-foot projection, at least in our context, meant it could retard the driving rain. So window was protected from driving rain. For a good time of the afternoon sun, the sun did not come in. For example, why do you think Rajasthan has so many in and out into the serration of the external facade? And one of a quick study one of my students did showed that even a 2-inch of projection of a cornice bend in certain part of Rajasthan when sun is overhead, for 20 minutes, it couldn't, shelter the whole facade. So for 20 minutes in an intense sun afternoon, if you don't have heat coming onto the surface by just 2 inch of projection, wonderful strategy. But today, we want no chhaja, we want no in and out. Earlier, if you see Ahmedabad core houses, ground floor had receded by the Otla. That means the first floor came up to Otla, so first floor was projecting more than the ground floor. Second floor was projecting even more than the first floor. So vertically projecting floors meant that when sun was overhead, entire facade was under the shade. So you had very little to worry by unduly inviting. So now glass as a material, what does it do? That I'm first inviting the heat and the glare, and then I'm trying to invent the doubly glazed helium glass, gas glass, the kind of tainted glass, the thermal glass and whatnot. But and these are research statistics. It's not my emotion. I'm not against technology, but if you have a clear, transparent glazing, your 100% transmittance. Now, if you have double glazing, you can reduce 10%. If you have a tainted glass or whatever such glasses, you can reduce up to 40%. But without any such thing, if you simply have 1 meter awning or an overhang, you already reduce to 20%, 25%, 75% reduction. So why not use this common sense things first? Then you go for technology. As I said, who gave us right to? So first in that bylaw, the only one example I wanted to say that, in cold climate where sun is welcome, in Montreal, the bylaw said that you do whatever to your building, even a tall building in a downtown. Two things, when you say nature, it said that your building cannot be taller than, the Montreal in Canada, the word comes from Mont Royal, Mount Royal. So no building can be taller than the Mount Royal. So that is respect for that natural feature. Second, there are many view corridors. So urban design guidelines says, even if it's a university coming, campus coming there, from certain street where you can see mountain through and through, you cannot place your building in that view cone. So you can't kind of block that presence of that feature felt by the view cone. Bali once upon a time had that rule, no building taller than coconut. Simple. An island, nothing taller than coconut tree. And lastly, it said that now performance bylaws for environment, they want heat. So it said do whatever to your building, but you have to prove that your building would allow 3 hours of sunshine on the day of equinox on the opposite footpath. And that is why all North America, you see what is known as a wedding cake profile planning. So you have upper floor receding instead of projecting in our hot dry climate. There it is receding, so maximum sun can come down. Okay, so it is integrated right in the bylaws, in the planning, as I said, with view corridors, with orientation scene, etc. North-south orientation with long side taken out for the vagary of weather. And yet north and south you can manipulate because southern inclination of sun is more manageable than western, which is very low, that no overhang can cut down. So at all levels of planning, detailing, materiality and construction, as well as finishes, white color, glossy, and you can, in a mandir, barefoot, you will have hell on a black or a dark surface walking, but just a lime tuna layer on it, and at least it is bearable. Okay, so all the aspects come together, but not only for environmental kind of comfort, but as I was saying, that every aspect, one plastic gamla in a house and at the inauguration for pictures you put it, but very next month you get bored looking at the same plastic plant as against one natural plant, whatever, bamboo shoot or erica palm. Not only it will oxygenate the inner air, but because of its decay, because of its sprouting, because of its kind of asymmetrical growth, because of its whatever, even though it may not be the most best composition, you can take it all along. So that's how there are a number of ways we bring in nature, like courtyard houses, even from first civilization. And we brought in nature in terms of many things. We can even put Tulsi Kyara and bring in plant there, rain there. We collected water below that, so water in rain as well as underground tank, as well as sun and wind. So, and it was a space, Brahmastan. All right.
Okay.
Young is asking a question: is there a lot of over-dependency on technology in today's world, and how to overcome that in coming time? And I would add to that, like especially in academics, as we are teaching, basically to increase some sort of sensorial aspects in students, it is difficult for us also because of the context. So how to do that?
Yeah, so first of all, see, anything has to begin at the way of life, and that's exactly why this seminar topic was taken. That today we have learned that nature takes away the boredom, not your 50 channels on the TV. I have 3 generations in my house, and the kids get bored to death looking at the cartoons or whatnot. Right now also, you might have seen he walked around and he wants to play. He wants to go to the garden. He wants to play something and whatnot. So one, in our routine, if we give it a place, and therefore in our design, we provide for that. It's not a compulsion, but at least there is a choice for me to come out. That's what balconies did. That's what so even when you teach or when you design, make that as an integral component. Like when I was a student would have failed if his toilet, there were always certain jury as an expert to only look at the ventilation and natural ventilation in toilet, kitchen, and your corridors. So nobody could take liberty that your toilet would be ventilated by exhaust, and these toilets were not stinking. So who gave us the liberty to? So technology, there is nothing wrong. Even the wheel was a technology invented, telephone was a technology invented. So some technology brought us together, while some technology separated us. So we have to know that which is technology which we are putting undue dependence on. For example, at night, using electricity should not be a problem or a question. We don't have to live and suffer miserably. But in daytime, where there is enough bright sunlight, but by designing a dark corridor, if I am depending myself on exhaust as well as the artificial light, that part is a crime. If in Bangalore, if the natural temperature outside is 24, but in a hotel room I give a fixed glazing, and because of the radiation, my inside is warmer than outside, and just to match outside temperature of 24, because of fixed glazing, inside I have to run AC to get 24, then it is a crime. Okay, so right from, in a design, you take 6 decisions: siting and location, form and massing, movement and organizational structure, choice of elements, material and technique of construction, and the finishes and filigree. And all 6 design decisions, you keep yourself informed about its implication, and you design with that intent or that sensibility. Your decisions would be in sympathy to, like you saw this example of Jahaj Mahal in a hot, dry climate where humidity is an effective microclimate tool. And that's how even in flooring I was, right from siting between 2 water ponds, one above, one below, to its massing, to its cross breezing, through its circulation of water, through its natural ventilation, through the sound and romance of the Kharkal water, through the sparkle of the water, and no drop of water is wasted despite. So it was not being sorry for the scarce resource. On the contrary, you celebrated the scarce resource and architecturally integrated. See, all Rajput and Mughal architecture without electricity, without kind of such undue pumping, etc. And yet, and with scarcity of water, both cultures very, very explicitly in architecture brought in water, light, wind as the primary form, and through their inlay and other things, nature as vegetation or so and so forth. So these architecture therefore are a good reference point to learn from and apply it. And today you can make today a new jali with new material with CNC machine, but jali to perform as jali rather than with a fixed glass, just a decor. So that's what I was trying to say, that all these come inherently to those elements and their function. Okay? And remember, finally, the goal of existence and architecture is to maintain the harmonious balance of human to human and human to nature. And post-pandemic, as I said, let me conclude by bringing the beginning towards the end by recollecting. We right now know with how little we can still survive, and not survive. Nobody is miserable. We can live as happily. Of course, you may not have been able to get out of your compound, but you have lived together happily. You're not starved, and you've been able to live without having to unduly make too many trips outside, without having to do so many things which you did wrongly. Without buying something from mall, you could still do things. You didn't have to get another set pairs of clothes unduly. So we learned the difference between essential and excessive. So first get to that frugality. So as always, first you must learn to refuse what is not required. Then you have to reuse. Like we've been using space in the morning, afternoon, evening differently. So use, and that's why you have to have right norms and standards, which we should realign. We don't have to have, even in a institute, oh, this is auditorium. Once in, 3 months it might be in use, and then it's a wasted space. Earlier, we had always amphitheater or go to the terrace, and when it is a good weather, only in the evening there'll be cultural program. Why May afternoon should be a cultural program? We used to sleep outdoors and daytime be below in the ground floor, and we won't have climate affected in poor houses. So right from way of life to what is essential. So reduce consumption, use technology, but what is useful. Right now we are able to communicate through technology, but at the same time, closed door, window, and then running AC full blast, even if it cools off at 7 o'clock in the evening, that might be an issue. So you have to therefore, as a professional, you have to know, like doctor diagnoses the patient and the kind of disease. Same way we have to know the context, place, program, people, and then get the most appropriate through our design decision. That's how you would come close to culture, climate, and construction.
Thank you so much. That was very
Okay,
insightful.
Yatin bhai, thank you so
Alright.
much.
My pleasure. Thanks for the opportunity. Thanks, AURO, and all participants for spending your nap time into this lecture. Thanks for joining it.
Thank you.
Hope it